Hello, my name is Jerry Junkin. I am the director of bands here in the Butler School of Music, and it is my privilege to conduct the University of Texas Wind Ensemble.
Well, thank you so much for sitting down, and we're so excited because in just a couple weeks, major concerts coming up for the Wind Ensemble, right? We're leaving Bates because this concert is just, or Butler, I should say, because this is just so big, it can't be done on campus. So we're going to the Long Center, and we're doing just a massive concert.
Right.
So let's talk a little bit about this concert.
Sure, happy to. First of all, we're very excited to be performing in the Long Center. Of course, I've been in the Long Center many times, but this will be the first time that I will have performed there, and also certainly the first time I think any of our Butler School groups have performed there. Although we had a contingent of players who helped with the Bernstein Mass performance a few years ago, but this is our first standalone. So I think it's going to be a very exciting concert. It features a world premiere of our very own Professor Donald Grantham, who, as a surprise to me, this was organized by other people, but he wrote a piece and dedicated it to me and my work here.
Wow.
So the concert will begin with a fanfare called Fanfare for the Maestro, written by Don Grantham. So this will be the first performance of that. And it is, in typical Grantham fashion, a terrific piece. It's going to be a wonderful way to begin the concert.
Cool. And what's after that?
Then after that, our professor of saxophone, Stephen Page, is going to be joining us for the first of two pieces by the great John Corigliano. His amazing saxophone concerto entitled Triathlon, which features one soloist playing all three saxophones, soprano, alto, and baritone saxophone, not at the same time, obviously. But the first movement is for soprano saxophone. Second movement, beautiful second movement, is for alto saxophone. And then the third movement begins on baritone saxophone with the soloist having to do things that are just unnatural. But then it ends with the soloist returning to soprano saxophone. But it is a thrilling piece, originally composed for orchestra. It was commissioned by the San Francisco Symphony. And so John wrote it obviously for them and for the American saxophonist Timothy McAllister. But from the beginning, John Corigliano felt like this is something that could be a wind ensemble piece. And so Peter Martin, who at that time was with G. Schirmer, made a transcription for band, and we were part of the consortium that commissioned that. So in effect, this is a premiere of the wind ensemble version of this stunningly amazing piece.
That's amazing. I want to talk more about that. But then there's intermission, right?
Yes.
And then there's kind of it's massive. So let your ears rest over intermission, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then we enter into a completely different sound world with Circus Maximus, which the reason for performing it, it's a masterwork, but of course it's his third symphony, but this is also the 20th anniversary of the premiere, which took place on our campus in Bass Concert Hall. So we're looking forward to revisiting it. We did a 10th anniversary performance, and now this is the 20th anniversary performance.
Wow, great. So let's go to the start of the program and kind of go through it. So the first piece, it's about you. So how does that work?
Well, yeah,
that's quite an honor.
It was quite a surprise, and my colleagues surreptitiously, behind the scenes worked with Professor Grantham, and he very graciously agreed to do it. And as I mentioned, just wrote a terrific piece. Not an easy piece, but Don doesn't know how to write an easy piece, so this is another one. But it's
the
really
rest
terrific.
of the concert's easy though, so it's
right. It just all falls together by itself.
All right, so now let's move on to the first Corigliano piece, the saxophone piece.
Mm-hmm.
So,
extraordinary piece. The first movement, as I said, is really electrifying because in all three movements, he uses the high register of the instruments, particularly in the first and last movements. So altissimo, we would call it, notes that aren't really on the instrument, but that the players have to figure out some sort of a way to manipulate. But it's absolutely thrilling music. And you can appreciate, I think, when the audience hears it, the technical virtuosity that is required, but it's also yet at the same time, it's a really beautiful piece. So the first movement, as I said, is for soprano saxophone. And I think that the transcription, the transferring of the music from the orchestra medium into the wind ensemble medium works really, really beautifully.
Yeah, and Stephen is going to be the saxophonist.
Yes.
You couldn't ask for a better soloist.
No,
right?
he is. Stephen Page is one of my favorite people on the planet, first of all, but a really, truly remarkable saxophonist.
Yeah, and what's that like to have 3 different instruments? Is that hard?
He could better answer that, but yes, it's very difficult because of the mouthpiece setup. For one thing, first of all, to make that last switch where he is playing in the third movement, probably the most virtuosic music that has ever been conceived for the baritone saxophone, and then have to switch from that large instrument going back to the smallest instrument to the soprano saxophone requires just amazing agility, both from just the embouchure, the mouth, just the way the instrument is played, just from the hand position, the fingers on the keys, everything about it is a dramatic change.
Yeah, and you have to keep the reed wet too, right?
Oh, sure.
So
yeah.
like, how do you do that with all it? Must be so hard.
That's his
yeah.
problem.
Yeah.
But he's going to figure it out.
Awesome. So 3 movements, and now let's move on to kind of the grand finale of this concert, Circus Maximus.
Yes.
So huge piece in classical music world. Definitely in the wind world, right? It's just like the holy grail almost. Would you say that's accurate?
It had a profound impact, I will say, on the entire world of music, but especially in the wind band world. Let me start out by saying this. I had fallen in love with John Corigliano's music back in the 70s, really, with the film score to Altered States and with I was at one point a clarinetist before being forced into retirement. So the amazing clarinet concerto I've always loved. And so hearing those pieces, I mean, I can remember back in as I said, the late 70s, early 80s, thinking, oh man, this guy would write a really wonderful wind ensemble piece someday. And he made several visits here. I got to know him a bit and mentioned the possibility, and at first he demurred and was like, oh, I don't think I could do that. I don't know anything about bands. I live in New York City. There aren't really bands here, and all these transpositions, I'm just not accustomed to that. But the conversations continued, and he was here, I think perhaps for the last time he was here doing one of the visiting composers' residencies. He had just given a talk about his 3 concerti, oboe, clarinet, and piano. And at the end of it, there was a little time. So I said, hey, would you want to step into my office for a minute? So he, I think maybe reluctantly agreed.
Locked the door.
Right. And I said, what I want to talk to you about. And he was like, oh, yes, I know. And then he said, here's what you do. If you want me to write this piece, you need to start sending me scores because I just don't know band music that well. So if you would send me scores that represent out-of-the-box thinking, that are really good pieces in your estimation, let me look at those and just see if I can get any ideas going. And so I immediately called a friend of mine who was a music store dealer, and I said, I want you to send these pieces, these scores to this address. So
that's interesting. What were the pieces?
Yes. So there were 2 pieces by Joseph Schwantner, From a Dark Millennium and The Mountains Rising Nowhere. I sent him 2 pieces of Karel Husa, the music for Prague 1968, An Apotheosis of This Earth, the Vern Reynolds Scenes, and Scenes Revisited, which he had heard on a concert here and which he had mentioned that he was particularly interested in, things like that.
Okay.
Without knowing whether he was really going to look at them or not.
I
mean, there's always the possibility that maybe this was just an exercise in futility. But then I would start getting calls from him every once in a while. And I had sent him some very traditional band pieces too. And he said, I noticed in the Holst First Suite in E flat, which is an old traditional staple in the band repertoire, he said the timpanist plays triangle in addition to timpani. Is that possible in band music? I said, oh, of course. That piece was written in 1921. I mean, that's been around forever. He goes, that's so interesting because in orchestral music you can't do that because you would have to pay doubler's fees. So just people never do that sort of thing. Interesting. So then he calls back about a month later and he says, I notice in Karel Huss's Apotheosis of This Earth, there are 5 cornet and trumpet parts, and they go divisi a 2, so you would have to have 10 players. Do bands have 10 trumpet players? And I said, they can have whatever you want. That's the great thing about it. Just, you just write. And then he started asking again about the transpositions in the saxophone. I said, just make a C score. We're accustomed to that. David Meslenka, I had sent him some of Mr. Meslenka's pieces too. You can see they've all written in C scores. So fine to do that. So I could tell that he was really considering it.
So each conversation, you took off the guardrails a little bit more. Exactly.
And at some point, I got a phone call from Peggy Monastra, who at that time was at G. Shermer and was handling his music. And she said that I believe that John is ready to do this.
Wow.
So then we had to work out the details.
Great. And so it's called Circus Maximus, right?
Yes.
Which is a famous almost like a Colosseum,
yes.
Right? That was Roman?
Huge, larger than the Colosseum. It was this great outdoor arena akin to like the polo fields or something like that, except that would seat over 150,000 people. And people would be there for chariot races, and all of the debauchery that the great Roman Empire had to offer.
Yeah, and so how did he come up with that Roman theme?
I think he was intrigued by it from the beginning, and he did go to a concert in Carnegie Hall. He knew that we were going to perform. The idea is we would perform it here in Austin, and then we would perform the piece again in February of 2005 at Carnegie Hall for a concert that we were doing there, which was part of a college band directors convention. And so he had gone to a concert in Carnegie Hall, and he said, I don't think I heard one note of the concert because I was just looking around the hall and I was looking at what the possibilities of the hall were. And I could imagine these trumpets being placed in the boxes surrounding the audience. And, there's this highest balcony, which I could see one player up there. And anyway, he just started getting ideas about a spatial piece, and that led him, I think, to put the two ideas together, the idea of Circus Maximus, along with the idea of the interior of Carnegie Hall.
Well, I would think of those two venues as totally different,
yes.
But it's kind of interesting. It doesn't sound like a Roman, like what we think of as like a gladiator, right? It has a very kind of modern feel.
No, yes, absolutely, because what he does is he takes that idea, but puts it in today's terms with all of the things that we're experiencing today. And you have to remember 2005, that was not that far removed from 9/11, from 2001. And so this notion that all of this that we know and that surrounds us in the world could actually come to an end at any moment. All it takes is one, hate to make it all dark, but it takes one blast from a bomb or something like that, and it's all over. And it's really a comment on our society today about the overstimulation of our society and how not only sounds, but how we are living our lives through our phones in our pockets, through the 1,000 television stations at our disposal. So all of that comes together. And people remember in this piece when they hear it, the trumpet fanfares from the beginning, certainly the ending of the piece, which is unique, and it has these huge sort of cataclysmic moments in it. But for me, I think the most special moments are the quiet moments of the piece. The night music 1, night music 2, and then the prayer section at the end are just absolutely spellbindingly beautiful.
Yeah, and music is always better listened to live.
Yes.
But this piece, it'd be hard to listen to just a recording of it because there's so much going on. Like you said, like the trumpets are just a small part of it. So let's talk about what makes this piece unique. It's not just a band on the stage. It's all encompassing.
There are 3 bands, if you want to get specific about it, because there is an on-stage band, but then there is also a small marching band that plays from the back of the hall, and they actually process up to the stage and around the audience, surrounding them in sound, plus 15 trumpet players, actually 11 that are out in the house, who also surround the audience. They're giving these amazing fanfare calls, really that start the piece, but which continue, they reoccur. Then there are 2 horn players who are up in one balcony who are emulating the sound of wolf calls. That happens during the night music 1 section. Then there is one lone single clarinet player as high up as you can get in the hall, and that sound comes once again through in the night music section. So sound is coming from all around the hall and enveloping the audience.
Yeah, it's really a piece. I mean, I heard it many years ago, but like once you hear it, you will never forget. Like where you were and just the whole thing. It just takes over you. It's just such an experience. So are any of these the scores for it?
Yes, I can show you.
Yeah. So
here's what he sent me. This is what he actually sketched out.
Oh, wow.
When he was at Carnegie Hall, and you can see him with the placement around here, and then his ideas about what the band would be. There's 4 saxophones plus a double bass player that are positioned over here.
Wow.
So yeah,
this is actually him sketching it out?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Yes. And here's
talk about like a historic document.
Exactly.
Hold on to this. Yeah.
Exactly. But also, this was interesting to me because the first thing he sent me was this, what is essentially the cover page, and then this, which is the graph.
Oh my gosh.
Of the piece, which he always does this from the when he starts to write a piece, he graphs what he wants, how he wants the piece to unfold during, in this case, the 34 minutes, 35 minutes of the piece.
So is this like volume? Is this emotion? Like what is this?
Yes, to both of those, with a few notes in there about how it will build. So the marching band enters here.
This is exactly how I remember ending.
Yes, right. This incredible build to this moment, which is the reviewer said when we played it in Carnegie Hall in 2005. The reviewer, who's a very kind review, said that always he had believed that the loudest sound ever produced in Carnegie Hall was the Cleveland Orchestra with Pierre Boulez conducting the piece Arcana by Edgard Varese. And he said, I'm happy to now award that to the University of Texas Wind Ensemble.
We're from Texas. We do it bigger, right?
That's right. But it's the piece is a symphony. He calls it his 3rd symphony.
Okay.
And we were having the discussions, making the commission, I asked for a big piece, and I said, it would be great if it could be your 3rd symphony, because his 1st symphony, which won the Graumeyer Award, which is an amazing piece, is for full symphony orchestra. The 2nd piece, which won the Pulitzer Prize, 2nd symphony, was for strings alone. So I thought it would be great to have his 3rd symphony be for winds. But he was a little...
That's interesting. So symphony, I thought that had to have strings. It doesn't.
No.
It's a symphony. Okay.
No, absolutely. There are all sorts of symphonies for band. By Hindemith, Morton Gould, all sorts of people. Yeah. So this particular piece, he thought, that's too much pressure. I don't know that I want to call it a symphony. But then when he completed the piece, he said, it is a symphony. So it is my 3rd symphony.
Wow, this is just so interesting. So what's going on over here? Like, what are these like spikes over here?
Yes, I believe that's from the channel surfing movement.
Okay,
the movements are all connected. They're not separate movements. So it's everything is connected, sometimes with very abrupt changes from one movement to the next, sometimes just with this gradual evolution. But in the channel surfing movement, it's just what it says, the way we live our lives, with a remote control, and we're flipping through.
And this was
channels.
pre phones.
Yes.
Pre-smartphones, yeah.
It was. Around the same time. Not everyone had them. We had them, but not like we do now, But we did, this was, cable television had evolved to the point where there were like 500 channels, 600 channels. And we would just sit there, all of us, and just flip through channels. And that's what this is supposed to emulate, because the sound is coming from different parts of the hall, abruptly cut off, and then another group is playing, and then abruptly cut off and moves to another thing. So these are just abrupt changes in sound.
Yeah, no, I remember this just being so powerful. So awesome. All right, so let's...
and then he started sending me, not in order necessarily, but he started sending me, this is his manuscript. So he started sending me 3-4 pages at a time, something like that. And kept saying, "No, please just tell, I've never written for band, so I don't know if I'm doing this correctly or not. I need your," but this is John Corigliano. He didn't need my feedback, but I would call him and, say, "I think this is going to be amazing. I can just hear and see how this is evolving."
So just real.
Sure.
So what instruments are these that he's?
Yeah, so it looks like, he writes this in a short score, like a piano score.
Okay.
But these are the surround trumpets here with percussion interjections. And so he wants these effects and percussion. So he's just showing, anyway, how this is going to build. And he has his own unique notation. So he writes these triangles, which show how many cues there are in a measure, not necessarily in strict conventional time. Now, he writes some in 4/4 time, 12/8 time, whatever, but these are all based on the conductor's cues.
Oh, wow.
And it is amazing because it simplifies what sounds like incredibly complex music. And this, I first became aware of it in the film score to Altered States, which is a really brilliant score, should have won the Academy Award. He later won it for the Red Violin, but he should have won it for Altered States. But there is amazing string writing, which sounds so complex. And when you see the score to it, it's basically the first player starts, and then each player down the road just starts at their own leisure a little time after. So a conductor actually only gives one cue, but there's this incredible chattering that's going on in the strings.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and so he uses that same technique a lot in Circus Maximus.
Wow.
And you see here how the piece is starting to build after it comes out of those fanfares with the percussionists playing these quintuplets, these big sounds at the beginning, and all these big glisses that just sound like these incredible enunciations. And that does, I think, harken back to Roman times. You can imagine those sorts of sounds.
How much did it change this to the printed score?
Some, not a lot though.
Okay.
He is a bit of a tinkerer, which is great, because he wants it to be a certain way, and he's constantly trying to improve it. So I can remember we workshopped it with him a little bit. He came when we were doing the run up to the first performance. He came on 2 occasions, and I can remember rehearsing in Bates.
No pressure, right?
No, but he's great.
Okay,
he has incredibly fancy ears, and he knows every note he's written. So as a composer, he's a great joy to work with. He's direct, but not in any way mean. He just knows how he wants the music to sound. And I remember at one point he cuts us off and he says, I don't know, I'm so tired of this now in F. Is there any way that everyone in the band could raise your part a half step when we get to, from these bars to this bar, when this repeats again? And I thought, oh, this is going to be a mess, but yeah, we'll try it. And so we did, and they did it. And he said,
"They could just do it on the fly like that."
He said, "That's okay. That's it. We're going to leave that in the piece." So there was someone, his copyist from G. Schirmer was there with him. So we're going to change that. We're going to change those four. That makes a huge difference. So, the fact that he was still thinking about developing the piece, I think, is to his credit. And then we move into the second movement, which has the saxophones and the double bass sequestered up in a balcony, and so it's called screen /siren. So hearkening back to the sirens in Greek times, who would call ships to the rocks. But it's really a beautiful moment because your attention for the first time is not directed toward the stage and to the trumpets around, because there's this sound, and if you're sitting in the orchestra level, you're not exactly sure where it's even coming from.
I remember that feeling,
so
disoriented.
Yes.
So now this is just after the channel surfing, right?
Before the channel surfing. This is just after. This is all the introitus. What has happened up until now, and then this movement is immediately interrupted rather violently by channel surfing.
Okay, yes.
All of these different, and there is no segue. It is very abrupt, which moves into then the various episodes.
So, I remember this just being so powerful, that channel surfing.
Yes.
Is it hard to conduct that?
Yes. I will admit that it is, because it takes you have to work out your fingerings, before you start this one, because it always, the tempi of the new music is never related to the old tempi. He wants it that way. He wants it to be very abrupt.
Yeah, I've never had this experience in any other piece of that channel surfing. It was so jarring, which is it's supposed to be.
Yes,
but
exactly.
yeah, like you'll remember this the rest of your life.
Right.
Is that really only that short, the channel surfing?
Well, that's repeated. So that music is repeated, and then these are just the various segments. So that's like this woodwind improvisation. Then it's interrupted by the onstage, basically brass and percussion, and then this very quiet saxophone music comes back, and then it's interrupted by the two horns up in the balcony, and so it just continues to go back and forth and get sort of turned on its head and flipped upside down, but in a way that is not, it could end up being kitschy, or but somehow it really works, and it has a tremendous impact to it, I think. So, and gets exactly at what he was trying to show, that our lives are just jarring. We're yanked from this place to that place with constant interruptions. And you can see how it then begins to build as all of this stuff goes on top of each other. So this is what's going on stage, and these are the surround people. With the marching band beginning to play, they're not marching yet, but they're playing from the back of the hall as well.
And so what are these boxes written here? Is that...
Yeah, these are just his instructions.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, about what he wants to have happen there. Like, for instance, I'll just read one of them. The players finger the notes in parentheses, but do not play them. They make a crescendo while they're blowing air through their instrument, and you pause between, and then he underlines, do not synchronize with other players. So, those sorts of instructions he will write and put in those little boxes.
And so now's when the marching band comes in?
Yes. They're playing. They the first time they make an appearance, they just play from the back. And they play the same music that they play throughout the piece, but they are part of the channel surfing. But later on, during the Circus Maximus movement, which is the big sort of 2/3 of the way through the golden mean, golden proportion moment of the piece, where all of the music that you've heard thus far in the piece starts building and starts being played on top of each other, and the marching band starts moving through the audience and comes up the center aisle, around to the front, and then back out the back. They go out of the hall just at this big climactic moment when the world's loudest chord is played, which takes it makes a diminuendo that takes over a minute and a half to actually wind down.
Yeah, incredible. Now, when he first said marching band, what was your thoughts?
Because because I knew that we were going to play this in New York, and he said marching band, and I thought he meant the entire Longhorn Band. And so I thought, oh my gosh, I want to give him what he wants, but I don't know that we could afford to take 400 people to New York City, but and he goes, no, I'm just talking about a few players. So that he put me at ease with that. So it ends up being 7 players: E-flat clarinet, 2 trumpets, trombones, percussion. But it's actually very effective the way that moves through the audience, and they hear that music moving around them and then out as all of the other stuff is almost cacophony is going on in the hall.
Yeah, I remember when I saw this, it almost felt like a New Orleans, like in the street band.
Yes.
Is that what you're going for, or are you going for more of like a strict, like traditional marching band? No,
because the music is fun. And we've debated about using costuming for the marching band. And he and I had talked at some point about sort of coming up with something really wild, like Cirque du Soleil sort of looking costumes for the marching band, until he saw the Longhorn Band uniforms. And then he thought, that's what it's got to be. They've got to be in those. So
awesome. All right. Well, let's keep going.
Yes. So let's get to, I'll show you how this is the night music.
So this is the quiet parts.
Yes,
And you said this is some of your favorite in the whole.
Yes, absolutely. This and then the prayer movement toward the end. But this just shows this big glissando. And these are all really sort of effects with people sneaking in. These are clarinets who sneak in, play sustained notes. There's 9 clarinets on stage, and so they all enter at a different time, making a crescendo, and then they do these long falls. And it just creates a beautiful effect with then these wolf calls coming from
wow.
the...
So here on page 31?
Yes, And he had been commissioned by a well-known American ballet company to write a ballet about wolves. And he was halfway finished and the project fell apart. The commissioning fee didn't happen and all this stuff. So it never happened. But he had gotten really intrigued in that idea. And so at the time he was composing that piece, he had talked to some people about how to make a sound that sounds like wolf calls. And a horn professional had shown him how you could do this on the French horn. So that's where the idea for the wolf calls, because it's just supposed to sound like nature music. All of this is nature music. And there are these little percussion blips and blops being played by instruments like crotales and glockenspiel, which are when you're sitting there, if you close your eyes, you can just see stars, in the night sky. And then with these beautiful trombone glissandi. There's no loud music in this at all. It's all very quiet. And you just have to, I think when you hear this piece, you just give up trying to worry about the passage of time.
Yes,
and you just let it sort of envelop you, is the way to listen to it.
Yeah, I remember when I saw it, I couldn't tell you whether it was like 10 minutes or an hour.
Right.
Right, because it's just, you're just in this weird state. Yeah. It's wonderful.
There really is nothing like it. To be honest. To keep coming back to this. And then this is just this is the ending of the Night Music 1, which leads into this Night Music 2, which is quiet, but it is also reminiscent of maybe walking around the streets of New York City at 2 a.m. and you hear a little jazz coming from down the street from one club, or Austin 6th Street. But so the overall aesthetic is quiet, but then you hear this, these little snippets of jazz that are coming out. And then it begins to get a little bit more active as you around the corner and there's people out in the street. So these are just sort of night scenes, things that you could imagine happening at night. But the overall aesthetic of it is much more quiet than the big loud moments of
and
the
what do you
piece.
think the purpose of the quiet is in this? We're coming from a loud part. We're going to a very loud part.
Right. It's basically contrast. And so he could have ordered the music in a different way, I suppose. But it works so well this way because it's a balance, So you have this frenetic activity of the channel surfing movement, and then that goes into the Night Music 1, which is the most serene and still music of the piece. Yeah. So it's a wonderful counterbalance in a way, or balance, however you want to look at it.
Yeah, and what do you think he's trying to say by the night music? Like the channel surfing makes a lot of sense. The ending makes a lot of sense. What is he trying to say here?
I think the first one, and especially, it's different with the prayer, but the first night music is more about just the beauty of where we are. And again, maybe it's a bit of nostalgia when you put the whole piece into context that all of that could come to an end, as beautiful as the earth is, as beautiful as the world is, night, just sitting on your porch, hearing all these sounds. Here we would hear coyotes rather than wolves, but again, it's all very understated and very slow evolving and very peaceful.
Okay, great, yeah.
So then after the Night Music 2 comes the big, in a way, center of the piece, which is a return of this opening material. This is the Circus Maximus music.
Starting on 51, yeah.
Yes, But the music that we heard at the beginning with the trumpets, the offstage trumpets, the surround trumpets, makes a return, comes back, and then it just starts adding on layer after layer. And you can see that here, this is a part that he rethought a little bit. We don't need those 4 measures. So we'll, keep going. And, he does not to this day use a computer. A lot of people use a computer to compose. So this is all in his hand.
So he still doesn't even.
Nope. Still doesn't. And it's possible that Triathlon may be the last big piece that he ever will compose. He said that, but I've also heard him say that before.
Yeah.
So we'll see. But this is literal cut and paste.
Wow.
like with scissors, and then pasting. And you can sort of see how that
my
happened
gosh,
here.
yeah.
So like this is cut and paste.
Yeah.
So in a different way than we do it now with a computer, obviously. But then this is just showing how this music is all building up, and you can see here he writes "Marching Down the Aisle" for the marching band. They're playing this music. And you can see how many now layers are starting to form.
So we're really starting to build at this point.
Yes, all of the music that you've heard in the piece starts coming back and is being layered on top of each other. The horns are playing now. The saxophones are playing their music. The marching band begins to process up. It just continues to build. And you can see it says exit hall right as this sound occurs, which is every note of the chromatic scale played simultaneously.
Here it's on
percussion
62.
rolling.
Yeah.
Yes, and then just it says to stagger the breathing, so we don't hear it. It should be seamless, but the whole thing takes about a minute and a half. Just what looks like on the page, not very long. But all I do is I give 4 cues to show everyone where we are, and they just pace their diminuendo down so that it ends up, after all this being just one note in clarinet, just fades all the way down to the softest one clarinet playing as softly as possible, and then that leads into this beautiful prayer movement.
So how do you conduct this?
That's not the conductor's role. There is to use my ears to have it be as smooth as possible in rehearsal. The actual physical conducting of it, there's no big trick to it. So you just give the beats and show, and you mark the next cue that he's given, just so that people know where we are in the diminuendo, because there are people who are exiting. It's an orchestrated diminuendo.
Okay, yeah.
And so that way people know when to go out, and they always go out playing as softly as they can, so we don't hear any abrupt starts and stops in it.
Yeah. Awesome. All right, so now into the prayer.
Yes, which is a loose transcription of a piece that he wrote for chorus, his choral Amen. And this is an amazing part of the piece because it's so beautiful. It's 12-tone, though you would never know it, because it's just all these chords. It just makes a progression through each of the 12 tones, but through a series of modulations that one doesn't even hear.
Yeah, I would have never. I don't remember any 12-tone-ish.
No,
yeah,
not dissonant at all. It's very consonant. It's beautiful. And over these, behind the chords, I guess on top of them, sometimes through them, you hear these various solos. There's a beautiful English horn solo. There's a clarinet solo. There's an oboe solo that sort of take this line as these chords are unfolding behind those solo lines. And it's a really very, very beautiful moment in the piece, I think. Yeah. Once again, after the loudest moment of the piece, then we go to this quiet, in a way, the most quiet music.
Yeah.
Most consonant music of the piece.
And why is it called a prayer?
I think, again, it's because...
And it's okay if you don't know, right?
No, we've talked about it, because I think that he has... what he wants to do is, again, make the point that this prayer... We all wish, for great things to happen and for all of this to continue on, but it could end at any moment, and that sort of is what takes us into the finale, the coda veritas, which is then a building. There's some allusions to the opening music in the percussion, but it builds and builds and builds, and it ends on all of the trumpets surrounding the audience, playing, as he says, the highest note a trumpet player can play well, high B, and they have to hold it so long. I mean, it's so strenuous, it lasts for a long time, and they're holding this loud sound, and it's getting more and more intense, and then the piece ends with a shotgun blast.
Yeah. So yeah, probably it's famous for the shotgun blast.
Yes.
So let's talk about why the shotgun blast.
He wanted it. He wanted shock value, and I think he wanted to make the point that all of this could end with a blast. At some point, whether from a gun or whether a bomb or some other tragedy. But again, making the point that all of this stimulation could be cut off in a second.
Yeah.
at some point. And there's really nothing like the shotgun blast. People think, oh, you know, these days, I don't know that that's so cool and all that. But when you hear it, it hits you in the chest. We've tried
the sound waves.
Yeah, right. We have, it's a blank, obviously. We try to. We've tried it before on tours, doing it with like multiple bass drums and percussionists playing as that. It works, but it's not anything like having the actual gun blast there.
Yeah, and what's that like? So you have a bunch of students, right? We're in a university,
right?
It's hard to say like, okay, we're going to incorporate firearms.
Yes.
How does that work?
Yeah, it's always the most difficult part of the piece. It is, and I can remember when we did it here, but especially when we did it at Carnegie Hall in 2005. I had brought it up right away that this piece ends with a shotgun blast. Yes, no problem. That's fine. We're accustomed to these things. And as always happens, 1 week before the performance, I get a call. Okay, there's a big problem. We can't use the shotgun. So there's always in the last week incredible scrambling around trying to get documentation. So for that performance, we had to use a firearms artist from the local union, theater union, someone who, fired a gun on stage. But he was terrific. He took a cue, and it was great. And then, let's see, when else have we done it? Here we're using someone locally who's well licensed and all of that. And, of course, it is a blank, and it specifies in the score a 12-gauge shotgun using a a 1/2 load of black powder. That creates the sound that he's after. Now, he didn't know that. He just wanted a shotgun blast. But his friend, and a friend of ours, the composer Christopher Rouse, was a big gun enthusiast, had a huge gun collection and loved to go to the range. And so when he was talking with John about it, he said, well, here's what you need. I'll just tell you. So John took that idea, and that's in the score now.
So in the concerts, it'll be an actual professional shooting the shotgun?
Yes.
Yeah. Now that person, are they reading they probably don't know how to read music.
No.
So are they just waiting for you to?
But yes, I cue them, and I also have one of the percussionists, because they have to sit there for 35 minutes, in the percussion section. And it's very dramatic. Obviously when they stand up, and we have to put up warnings. We have to put something in the program that, there is simulated gunfire, so people aren't, because in this day and age, someone stands up in the back of, with a gun. I mean, that's, could be quite upsetting. So at any rate, we want to, in the interest of full disclosure, we tell everyone what's getting ready to happen. When we played it in New York at Carnegie Hall, there were signs up that said, simulated gunfire used. And one of the people who was from Tennessee who was going into the hall was overheard saying, well, of course they have guns. They're from Texas.
Yeah. It's so awesome. So, and then the gun, if I remember correctly, that ends the piece.
Yes.
The gunshot ends the piece.
That is the last note.
Yeah. So, is there any plan to do an encore, or can you do an encore after this?
I don't think you can.
I don't think so either.
It's, first of all, it has always in the past gotten such an enthusiastic audience response that I just it would take all of the wind out of the sails, I think, to do an encore. When we did it in New York, that ovation at the end lasted for almost a full 15 minutes. It was, wow. And I think that's crazy. John Corigliano is accustomed to but I think that surprised even him.
Was he there opening night? Oh,
he was there for it. And he will be here with us for this performance.
Oh, wow.
So, at age almost 87.
Wow.
There's an interesting story about that when we first performed it here in Bass Concert Hall, I had, again, called his manager and had said, we really want him here, but I have bad news. There's only one available date in February, and it's February the 16th. It's sort of a take it or leave it. So I'm hoping by some miracle that works with John's schedule. And there's this long pause. And she said, well, that's amazing. Long pregnancy. What is it? She says, that's his birthday. So,
wow.
so we actually gave the world premiere on his birthday, February 16th, 2005. So we're not quite at his birthday again, but almost.
Oh wow! So he's going to be there, and
yes, he's coming in on Thursday. He'll be here for the last couple of rehearsals, and he'll do some talking with. Ebony Thomas is playing his Voyages on the UT Symphony concert in another week or two after that. Then the Opera Theater, Butler Opera Center, is doing Ghost of Versailles, so he's going to speak with them and work with some students. So he'll be very much in residence for a couple of days.
Yeah, it's just such an opportunity for people to not only see this unbelievable piece. It's very rarely done.
Yes.
Right?
It's although it's been performed all over the world, but because of the size of the forces, and it takes a very special environment. As you said, we can't do it in Bates Recital Hall or a hall like that. So, it hasn't been performed all that often. The circumstances have to be right. It's been performed, though, at the Aspen Music Festival. Caleb Hudson, our trumpet professor, performed it at Aspen when he was a student there. It's been performed in Japan. It's been performed in China. It's had a number of performances, but it's not something that you see 20 times a year. You know?
It's not a Beethoven symphony.
Correct.
Right. You're not going to be, if you miss it this time, it's not coming around again next year.
Right.
At least here in Texas.
Exactly.
Right? You might have to go to Japan. Right.
That's right.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much for sitting down. We can't wait for the concert.
I can't wait either. I'm very excited about it.
Yeah. So. I think when you look back, do you think this will be one of the kind of the defining concerts of your career? Is it that big of a deal?
Probably. And the thing that I'm most excited about for it is for our students to experience the piece, but also to be around and with John Corigliano, who, as I mentioned, is a very kind person, but an amazingly brilliant, imaginative composer, musician person who at age 86 still has all of the get up and go of, he would put all of us to shame. So anyway, it'll be great to have him here.
And I guess he's someone who doesn't enjoy composing. That he always tries to turn down. So the fact that you got him to do this is just incredible.
I think it came at a good time because he said, I'm sitting on my desk at home as a letter from a famous orchestra, I won't name which one in the U.S., one that we would all know, wanted me to write another orchestra piece. And he said, I just don't want to write another 3 flute, 3 oboe, 3 clarinet, 3 bassoon, 4 horns, another orchestra piece right now. I've written many. They don't play those. Why would they play a new one? So I'm looking for something new. So I think the timing of it was just right.
Yeah, and I think composers like composing for wind because you can do so much. You keep taking those guardrails off, right? You can rehearse a lot longer, right? You don't have these strict union rules. And
for him, that was the thing, and he was amazed by that. We were supposed to have all of the printed parts from the publisher by the last class day in December before break that year so that we could do a reading of it. Well, that didn't happen. They didn't get them finished, and they only had the first movement, the introitus, and a little bit into the next movement.
So it was a stressful Christmas.
Yes, it was. So what we did was we had a reading of what we had on that last day, and this is before you could share, no Dropbox, no UT box, nothing like that, no file sharing. So we burned a CD of that reading and sent it to him, and FedExed it, overnighted it to him. He called me immediately when he got it and listened to it and said, this is going to be spectacular. This is what I was hoping for. And he said, I have to tell you, this is the first time in my compositional career I have ever received a recording of a rehearsal.
Wow.
Because the unions usually won't allow that.
Yeah, that's true, yeah.
And so what he was, and still talks about, a bit flabbergasted about, was the fact that the students were willing to come in, have extra rehearsals, that we lavished a lot of attention on this, even though we actually didn't get the music and couldn't start on it till after the Martin Luther King holiday in that January. So we essentially put it together in a month the first time with other pieces on the program. Nonetheless, it got I don't know I should go back and look at my notes and see how many hours of rehearsal that was. But he said, a professional orchestra would just never be able to do that. They sight read basically everything. And he said, it's amazing what they do, but it's 3 at the most 4 rehearsals, then the concert, and maybe 2 to 2.5 hours total is devoted to the new piece. So he said, he was totally enthusiastic about bands after this.
Yeah, and you do it probably better than anybody. I don't know if it's students or if it's you it's together fostering that. I remember before you went to Carnegie Hall, 6 months ago?
Yes.
Your rehearsals, there'll be like lunch breaks in the middle of the rehearsals.
Right. Well, that would, for special things like that was unusual because that group only existed at the time of that Carnegie Hall rehearsal. Because here, the way we rotate players through all of the groups, it's seldom that more than one concert, any group exists, with the same personnel, because they're going into the New Music Ensemble, they're going to the Butler Opera Center Orchestra, UT Symphony, Wind Ensemble. All the players are moving through all of those groups. So in that case, we sort of had to do it that way so we could put the group together.
Yeah, but can you imagine telling a professional orchestra,
no,
okay, we're going to rehearse from 9 to 5, but don't worry, I'm going to give you a half-hour lunch break.
No, I have some experience with professional musicians, and that's not the way it works.
But it is the culture here, and
Yes.
everyone's excited to do it.
Yeah.
Like, you never see students like, I don't want to, this is going to be horrible. They're excited, they're revved up, they want to rehearse.
Yeah.
So
yeah, no, they want it to be good. They have a lot of pride in what they do, and as well they should, because the students here are just extraordinary.
yeah, the fact that he said, "Can we bring that up half of that?" Right, and they could just do it on the fly is a
Right.
testament to our students.
Yes,
So,
absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for
Thank
sitting
you,
down.
Nathan. Yeah.
And everyone should go to this concert. If you don't go to
Absolutely.
any other Butler concerts this year, this is the one to go to.
I hope so, because I promise you, it's a concert that you will never forget.
You will. Yes, I do too. You will never forget. It just takes your breath away.
Right.
It's one of those concerts like you walk out of the hall and you almost can't talk about it.
Yes.
Right. You need like a day to process it.
That was the reaction when we played it in New York. It was amazing. I told you about this long ovation, which was remarkable. But I received a letter from someone who told me after the concert that the thing that was interesting was after the concert, the people spilling out into the street, how it was this mixture of almost giddiness and also people who just didn't know what to say, after
Yeah.
when they're still processing what they had just witnessed and
I was
experienced.
in that group. I wasn't
Yeah.
giddy. I was like, what was that? Right?
Right.
So, and back then there wasn't the internet, so you just read the program notes, right? So
Exactly.
now there's a lot more information on it. But yeah,
Right.
it's just, it's like no other symphony.
No, that's really true. Unique.
Yeah. So great. Well, thank you.
Thank you, Nathan.
I'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Enjoyed it. Yes,
Yeah.
looking forward to it.
Yeah.